should organizations try, you know, risky things? I would say the answer is yes, but I would say there's always guardrails around it. I think you have to measure, um, do we have, are we going to use this in a pilot setting first and understand understand and measure, what the outcomes of those risks we're taking are, and know that we're able to almost like, insure for those risks.
As we sort of get to the end of the conversation here, though, I want to bridge into kind of a tough area to think about in the world of innovation and AI, right? And it's tough because sometimes the consequences of being wrong, or of making a mistake, or of or just not predicting an outcome in AI especially, can be problematic, right? They can, on the gamut from annoying and embarrassing through to financially impactful in a negative way, through to uh, deeply, deeply problematic from a safety or a regulatory perspective. And so, how do you think about responsibility and governance around AI experimentation? How do you think about balancing, we have to try, we have to take the risk, with the fact that there are very real risks? I'm gonna leave that wide open question, then maybe we'll come to some specific examples.
Yeah, and that is like, I think we, even when, let's say, even when I'm not asked the question, I try to insert that type of of answer into the conversation that I have, more publicly, because that is really important. What I The way I tend to approach this with clients is that, governance is not, um, is not a one and done. Governance is a journey; it never ends, right? And as much as we have now, starting to see really, and especially after the generative AI rise, started to see AI governance become more top of mind. But the AI governance also starts with data governance, which we've always known we had to do, but kind of said, no, no, that's not, it's not so exciting to invest in data governance, good data quality, good data lineage. So if I bring those, let's say, guiding principles back into, how we do it, so, in a more practical way, um, it goes all the way from education at the beginning to understand, okay, what are you doing for data governance, and what's your understanding of what AI governance looks like, and as it relates to data governance. Um, and so that's, that say that education, what's the organization's understanding and practices around who wants data, what are the implications of change, who approves the use of data, how do you audit things back. So those are very practical concerns, and with technology that is very good at doing those things. And um, and I would say that the nice thing about it as well is that, we're starting to see improvements in that technology that make the work, let's say, more easier, a little bit easier to be accomplished. And what I mean by,
Yeah, what sort of improvements?
and I like, there isn't a good name for it, but let's say it's generative AI augmented, governance. So if you think about, in the past, you would have this, and I'm guilty of it, going to a client, doing like a very large data governance project, leaving them with 500-page deck slides, a page slide deck for them to go implement. That is so hard that people don't. It's collecting dust, in a shelf. Technology that exists today, in many cases, it's going to be, understanding, based on the data that you have, let's say, in a table or in a data structure, what's the definition, of that data. So creating that metadata can be automatically generated. Lineage for how data flows and what data is used can also be automatically, generated. So things that you would have to have somebody, doing, you now can get the help of tools, and therefore make your journey of implementing, data governance, and therefore and also, AI governance a lot simpler, because it's less manual. So I think that's one thing that you had mentioned before, is that sometimes people do not know what exists. So I find that that's one of the areas that there's, I'd say, less awareness, that we can now use, state of the art technology to help those tasks that maybe were not very, very exciting to do before,
Right.
and therefore people wouldn't do it. And if you think about that in this life cycle of, as you have good understanding of how your data flows, what your data looks like, privacy, anything that, personally identifiable information, how do you mask that, who has access. So I say all of that, those pre those those activities that may not be so exciting, if you have tools that are helping with that process, it's going to make organizations a lot more likely to do it. And that's going to feed into, okay, now I have this data, it comes from here, it's transformed in this particular way. Which machine learning models are using this data, and and you know and then how, which applications are then using these machine learning models, what types of decisions are we making, which stakeholders, internal or external, are seeing, are being impacted by these
Yeah.
decisions, and allowing you to go all the way back to what are some responsible uses of that data, right? So, for example, if you think about the decisions about loans, and am I going to be creating, perpetuating bias, because there's some pieces of data here that are making this model be biased towards certain decisions about a certain type of population, and what am I going to do, about that? So I think there's guiding, there's all the way from education guiding principles, but there is the use of technology to go all the way from, the data governance to the good uses of AI that will allow you to map all of that impact. Because if you leave all of that to be done manually, chances are it's
It,
not going to get
it's
done.
just not going to get done. And I think that's such an interesting insight, is that there there is this sort of governance and risk management that can be done effectively while taking risk, right? But you've got to do it. You have to do it. You actually have to do it, and people don't want to. So use tools. I love that thought that we can use AI, we can use innovation to help us do the things that we as people or organizations uh, don't want to do, and so put to the bottom of the priority stack.
Mhm.
Um, Let me ask. I'm going to put you on the spot with a yes or no question. And this is a really tough one, right? Because it always matters, but I'm going to do it anyway. Context always matters, but I'm going to do it anyway. Should organizations, if try something that they think might be extremely risky, should they just put it? Should they try? Should they throw it into production, even knowing that it could backfire in a serious way?
That's a hard one for, if I just go by the words you used, I would probably say no, because it seems that there's no guardrails around it, right?
Right.
I think, should organizations try, uh, you know risky things, I would say the answer is yes, but I would say there's always guardrails around it. I think you have to measure, um, are we going to use this in a pilot setting first, and understand and measure, what the outcomes of those risks we're taking are, and know that we're able to almost like, insure for those risks, because the consequences can be very high if you have no guardrails. One, human impact. So let's think healthcare, right? So would you do that and risk someone's life? So what kind of guardrails are you going to put so that that's not the case? So that you're helping, you're still moving the needle, but
I love it.
no.
I gave you an impossible question and scenario, right? Because of course, but this point that you can take risk with understanding certain guardrails, and you can scale, have a pilot or a POC at small scale, whatever you can do.